Why'd you call me that?
The lady didn't mean anything by that.
Why'd you say that to me?
I'd like to apologize for the lady.
I met him years later after he had left. He announced to a few people, "No, if you want to know, I'm not sorry."
It's hard to imagine American television history without Bonanza. For over a decade, the Cartwrights were more than just characters. They were family to millions of viewers across the country. Week after week, audiences tuned in to the peaceful, yet rugged world of the Ponderosa, where moral lessons played out against the backdrop of the Old West. But while the show painted a picture of unity and timeless values on screen, what went on behind the scenes was something else entirely. Tensions simmered quietly. Creative clashes, personal disappointments, and unforeseen tragedies unfolded far from the cameras. Some of the show's most beloved actors left suddenly, others reluctantly, and a few never got the chance to say goodbye at all. Why would anyone walk away from one of the most successful TV shows of its era? Was it ego, principle, grief, or something darker? These aren't the kinds of stories the network wanted you to know. These are the departures that shook Bonanza to its core, and in some cases, reshaped television itself. Pernell Roberts' departure was the first major crack in Bonanza's foundation, and to this day, it's still one of the most talked-about exits in classic TV history. As Adam Cartwright, Roberts played the eldest son, quiet, cerebral, and refined, a contrast to his more hot-blooded brothers. From the show's start in 1959, Roberts brought a certain gravity to the role. With a background in classical theater and a commanding presence, he elevated Adam to something more than just a supporting character. But as the seasons wore on, Roberts felt the scripts becoming formulaic. He wanted nuance, moral complexity, and storylines that pushed boundaries. Instead, he was handed predictable plots and surface-level dialogue. For a man who once performed Shakespeare on stage, this was more than a disappointment. It was a creative death. He began clashing with producers, pushing for more layered, controversial topics, while the network resisted, fearing alienation of their audience. His frustrations grew into resentment. In interviews, Roberts didn't hold back. He criticized the show's lack of intellectual depth and the television industry's tendency to play it safe. He once famously compared his role to Van Gogh painting commercial signs to pay rent. His mental health began to suffer under the weight of staying on a show that no longer fulfilled him. Finally, in 1965, after 6 years, he made the decision. That would define his legacy. He walked away. There was no dramatic send-off, no closure. Adam Cartwright was written off with a single line. He had gone to sea. And just like that, one of the show's core figures vanished, leaving fans stunned and co-stars baffled. Roberts' decision shocked many, but to those closest to the production, it wasn't surprising. There had been whispers for years of his restlessness, of his distance from the rest of the cast. Some called him difficult. Others said he was simply misunderstood, a serious actor trapped in a medium that didn't respect seriousness. After leaving Bonanza, Roberts returned to the stage and later found moderate success with the series Trapper John, MD, a role that finally gave him the creative control he had longed for. He never reached the level of fame he had during his Bonanza years, but he never seemed to care. What mattered more was integrity. "The important thing is that I tried," he once said. "I didn't let myself rot in comfort." He stayed true to that belief until his retirement in 1997, when he passed away in 2010. He left behind a complicated legacy, not just as Adam Cartwright, but as an actor who dared to walk away from success for the sake of his soul. For Roberts, staying would have meant slowly fading into a role he could no longer respect. His choice may have seemed reckless at the time, but it was rooted in something far deeper than ego. It was about not losing himself in the process of entertaining others, but not every departure from Bonanza was voluntary. In 1972, the Bonanza family was hit with a loss so sudden, so devastating, that it nearly ended the series altogether. Don Blocker, who played the beloved Hoss Cartwright, died unexpectedly during what should have been a routine medical procedure. Blocker wasn't just another cast member, he was the heart of the show. With his large frame and gentle soul, he gave Haas a warmth that anchored the emotional dynamics of the Cartwright family. Audiences of all ages adored him. He was both comic relief and moral compass, and his on-screen kindness mirrored the man he was in real life. Born in DeKalb, Texas, in 1928, Blocker had a unique path to stardom. A Korean War veteran, a teacher, and a holder of a master's degree in dramatic arts, he was far more than just a lovable cowboy. But it was that very humility, wrapped in strength, that made his death so hard to process. He went into surgery for gallbladder issues and never came out. A pulmonary embolism took his life within hours. He was just 43. The shock rippled through the cast and crew. Michael Landon reportedly wept when he heard the news. Lorne Greene was said to have been inconsolable. And the producers were faced with an impossible question: how do you carry on after losing the show's emotional center? Rather than pretend Haas never existed or recast the role a move that would have surely alienated loyal viewers, the producers made a bold and painful decision. They chose to acknowledge the loss directly, making Bonanza one of the first major TV shows to deal with a character's death as a reflection of real grief. That season, the tone of the series changed. The Ponderosa felt a little emptier. The laughter was a little more subdued. Even the scripts took on a more somber quality. Blocker's absence wasn't just a narrative gap, it was a spiritual one. His death marked a turning point not just for the show, but for television as a whole. It was a moment when the illusion of fiction was shattered by the weight of real human emotion. And it reminded viewers that behind every character was a real person with a real life and sometimes a real tragedy. Don Blocker's legacy lives on not just in reruns, but in the hearts of those who remember what it felt like to lose Os Cartwright. Then came David Canary, whose role as Candy Canati brought new energy to a show that was starting to show its age. Introduced in the 9th season, Candy was more than just a ranch hand. He quickly became a member of the Cartwright family. Canary brought a sense of grit and charm to the character that helped bridge the gap between old-school Western storytelling and a newer, more dynamic approach. Viewers connected with Candy almost instantly. But while he was winning hearts on screen, behind the scenes, a very different story was unfolding, one that had little to do with character arcs or creative control, and everything to do with cold, hard money. Despite his growing popularity and undeniable importance to the series, Canary's salary didn't reflect his contribution. While major stars like Lorne Greene and Michael Landon received steady raises, Canary was offered far less. The message was clear: he was valuable, but not that valuable. And for a talented actor with ambitions and self-respect, that was hard to accept. He eventually chose to walk away, not with fireworks or public statements, but with quiet disappointment. One week he was on the show, the next he was gone. No goodbye episode. No emotional send-off. Just an offhand explanation in the script, and that was it. What makes Canary's departure so significant is that it revealed something ugly about the entertainment industry. Here was a man who had done everything right, delivered a beloved character, helped keep the show fresh, and connected deeply with the audience. But in the eyes of the network, he was still just a supporting player. His story shined a light on the way television often undervalues the people who hold its stories together. After Dan Blocker's death, as Bonanza struggled to regain its rhythm, producers reached out to Canary again, this time with better terms. Michael Landon himself reportedly pushed for his return. Canary agreed, rejoining the show for its final seasons. But by then, the magic had started to fade. After Bonanza, Canary went on to achieve his greatest success in daytime television, especially in All My Children, where he played dual roles and earned multiple Emmys. His departure from Bonanza wasn't just about money, it was about standing up for his worth and refusing to be treated as disposable. And in the end, he proved his point not by making noise, but by letting his talent speak louder than any paycheck. And then there was Guy Williams, the actor brought in to fill a void left by Pernell Roberts, whose departure had left Bonanza with a noticeable gap. Williams, already well-loved for his role as Zorro, seemed like the perfect fit. He had the charm, the looks, the swagger. As will Cartwright, he was introduced as a nephew of Ben's, someone who could seamlessly integrate into the Cartwright family while bringing a fresh dynamic. On paper, it was a brilliant move. In practice, it became one of the show's more awkward chapters. Williams wasn't just a great actor, he was a rising star. And in a cast where Michael Landon was beginning to emerge as the creative force, that was a problem. Rumors swirled that Landon saw Williams as a threat, especially given how audiences immediately warmed to Will Cartwright. Whether those rumors were true or not, the result was the same: Williams's screen time began to shrink. Storylines were abandoned, scripts rewritten, and within a handful of episodes he was gone. No controversy, no fanfare. He simply disappeared from the show, leaving viewers to wonder what happened to a character who had so much promise behind closed doors. It seemed to be a classic case of politics and power dynamics. Williams was popular, charismatic, and had the potential to become a leading man on Bonanza. But in a show where existing stars had creative input and strong influence, there was little room for another rising star to shine. His departure exposed the fragile balance between collaboration and competition on long-running television sets. It also served as a cautionary tale: being talented isn't always enough. Sometimes timing, egos, and behind-the-scenes alliances determine the course of a career more than the audience ever realizes. Williams would go on to star in Lost in Space, and although his time on Bonanza was brief, it left a lasting impression. His exit was quiet, but the questions it raised about creative control and on-set politics still linger in the memories of longtime fans. When you look back on the legacy of Bonanza, it's tempting to only remember the sweeping vistas, the moral lessons, the iconic music. But beneath that surface was a more complicated story. A story of actors who walked away because they had to or because they weren't given a choice. A story of pain hidden behind smiles, of battles fought off camera, and of moments that shaped not just a show, but an era. These were not just cast changes, they were turning points. Turning points that revealed how deeply personal and political the world of television can be. And while Bonanza will forever remain one of America's most beloved westerns, its story wouldn't be complete without acknowledging the exits that shaped it, and the people brave enough to make them. He shortly afterward won the role that would forever etch his name into the annals of pop culture. Professor John Robinson in Lost in Space. In this new frontier, Guy Williams once again stole the hearts of viewers across the globe. As the steady father navigating a treacherous galaxy alongside his family, he didn't just act, he embodied grace under pressure, a warm beacon of safety in the cold unknown. Unlike the limited emotional palette afforded by Bonanza, Lost in Space allowed Williams to unfold the quiet strength and paternal wisdom that lay just beneath his dashing Zorro persona. And yet, fame and the lure of Hollywood glitz never held him in chains. Argentina, a land that had adored him since his Zorro days, became his second home and eventually the only one he wanted. He left the industry's chaos behind and found peace among people who saw him not just as an actor, but as a folk hero. There, in the heart of South America, he lived blissfully surrounded by admiration, respect, and tranquility until one tragic day in 1989, when he was found dead from an apparent brain aneurysm. No drama, no farewell, just a quiet exit from a life that had burned brightly across continents and generations. Lorne Greene's deep, commanding voice and grounded presence weren't just parts of Bonanza, they were its bedrock. As Ben Cartwright, he stood tall as the wise and unwavering father of the Ponderosa, guiding his sons and the audience through moral quandaries, family dilemmas, and the rough wains of the Old West. Greene didn't just read lines. He radiated integrity. His firm, compassionate authority became a touchstone for viewers for 14 solid seasons. But beneath that mountain of calm and character lay a more complex man. Born Lyon Hyman Greene in Ottawa, 1915, Lorne Greene had already lived one extraordinary life before stepping onto the dusty plains of Bonanza. He had been the trusted voice of a nation during World War II, earning the title the Voice of Canada for his steady broadcasts. Acting came later, slowly, with steady work across film and stage. But when Bonanza came calling, Green didn't just take on a role, he became a fixture in American homes. Yet by the late 60s, something shifted. The role that made him a star had become a comfortable prison. In a 1967 interview, when asked if he hoped the show would continue for 8 more years, he candidly said, "No." It wasn't cynicism, it was truth from a man who understood that artistic growth often dies in the shadows of predictability. Fame had embraced him, yes, but so had a quiet longing for something more. He never let that yearning show while Bonanza was still alive. Green remained its professional compass, never faltering in his duties. On set, he was a steadying presence, a mentor, a mediator when tensions flared. His respect among cast and crew ran deep. While his heart may have quietly knocked on other doors, he gave every scene, every moment, his complete attention. When the show ended in 1973, after a monumental 14-season run, Green faced a rare opportunity to start over, to try something new. And what he did next was anything but expected. He turned to music. Yes, the voice that had reassured a wartime nation and anchored a Western legend now sang ballads and recorded country tunes. In 1964, he stunned the music world with a #1 hit, Ringo, a spoken-word story song that topped the Billboard charts. It was a reminder that true artists don't retire into the roles that made them, they reshape them. Green didn't rest on the laurels of Ben Cartwright. He showed us that even the most iconic father figure in TV history still had more to say and in very different ways. His legacy was not just one of stability, but of surprising reinvention. Victor Sen Young, often overlooked by the mainstream narrative of Bonanza, was in many ways one of its most groundbreaking presences. His portrayal of Hop Sing, the Cartwrights' loyal cook, may have seemed small on the surface, but underneath it was quietly revolutionary. At a time when Asian characters were often reduced to caricatures or invisible altogether, Sen Young carved out something real, something dignified. Yes, Hop Sing started in the shadows, confined to the kitchen or comic relief, but Sen Young wouldn't allow him to remain there. Through his wit, grace, and humanity, he transformed Hop Sing into a character that mattered. He made the audience care. He made the audience see. And in doing so, he pushed forward the slow, grinding march toward visibility for Asian Americans on television. But behind that gentle smile was a man battling Hollywood's harsh realities. Despite his talent, he was pigeonholed into supporting roles, denied the opportunities he deserved. So he turned to another love, cooking. Sen Young authored the Great Wok Cookbook, introducing authentic Chinese flavors to households across America. He didn't just cook food, he bridged cultures. With it, he remained an advocate for representation on and off screen until the end. But life didn't grow easier for him. In 1972, Sen Young endured a nightmare. He was shot during a hijacking on a commercial flight. He survived, but the wounds, physical and emotional, never fully healed. As Hollywood aged him out and roles grew scarce, he continued to work quietly, hoping for change. That change, sadly, never fully came in his lifetime. In 1980, he was found dead in his home, the victim of accidental natural gas poisoning. It was a quiet, tragic end for a man who had fought so hard for a seat at the table. His legacy, however, would grow louder with time. Today we recognize what Victor Sen Young truly was: a pioneer. A man who stood tall in the background, elevating the show and the culture with every small gesture and every knowing glance. His contributions to Bonanza were never ornamental. They were essential. Michael Landon wasn't just the face of youthful fire on the Ponderosa, he was its soul. As Little Joe Cartwright, he brought passion, charm, and rebellion in equal measure. But what made Landon unforgettable wasn't just his looks or charisma, it was his intensity. Behind those playful grins and smoldering eyes was a man shaped by darkness. Born Eugene Morris Orowitz in Forest Hills, New York, he grew up in a home tormented by his mother's instability. She tried to take her own life and even his. Landon turned to sports, excelling in javelin throw, earning a scholarship to USC. But an injury ended that path. So he looked elsewhere for an identity, a future. He found it in a telephone book under the name Michael Landon, and from that moment on, he built a persona that would leave an indelible mark on television history. His breakout came in I Was a Teenage Werewolf, but Bonanza was where he transcended cult fame. Landon wasn't content to coast on his looks. He gave Little Joe vulnerability, grit, and layers that weren't on the page. And behind the scenes, he was hungry for more control, more meaning. That hunger soon translated into power. Landon began writing and directing episodes of Bonanza, an unheard of move for someone so young at the time. And his scripts weren't filler. They delved deep into family, love, pain, and loss. He challenged producers, argued for heartfelt narratives, and refused to let the show become formulaic. This ambition, however, made him both admired and feared. Landon's drive often clashed with others, and his perfectionism sometimes strained relationships. But one thing remained clear: he wanted to matter. He wanted Bonanza to matter. After the series ended, he didn't fade. Instead, he crafted his own legacy with Little House on the Prairie and later Highway to Heaven shows that reflected his deepest ideals: redemption, family, faith. But just as his story was hitting new heights, it took a devastating turn. In 1991, Landon was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The world watched in heartbreak as the man who had once seemed invincible faded away. He died that same year, only 54 years old. And with him went a part of TV's golden era, a fiery light. Extinguished far too soon. Ray Teal wasn't loud. He didn't demand attention with dramatic monologues or emotional outbursts. But in his silence, in the quiet weight of his gaze, he gave Bonanza one of its most grounding forces. As Sheriff Roy Coffey, Teal represented justice, not the kind one with guns, but the kind delivered through decency, patience, and moral clarity. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't always center stage. But every time he entered a scene, the world of the Ponderosa felt more real. Teal had been working in Hollywood long before Bonanza. Born in 1902, he had over 250 film credits to his name. He played sheriffs, sergeants, judges, men who stood tall in the face of chaos. By the time he joined the show in 1960, he had mastered the art of stillness. His Roy Coffey didn't need speeches. His presence alone was enough, but as time went on, the rigors of acting took a toll. Decades of shooting on difficult sets, often in brutal conditions, began to wear him down. There were no fights, no contract disputes, just a tired body asking for rest. Teal slowly faded from the screen, withdrawing from acting in the early 70s. Not out of bitterness, but necessity, he left without fanfare, just as he had worked for decades, modestly, professionally, with grace. He died in 1976 at the age of 74, leaving behind not just roles, but a quiet legacy of integrity. For those who loved Bonanza, Sheriff Roy Coffey was more than a character. He was the town's moral spine. Teal never craved the spotlight, but in doing so, he earned something greater: respect. His was a presence that, even in silence, spoke volumes. Mitch Vogel joined Bonanza in its twilight, but he arrived like a breath of fresh air. As Jamie Hunter Cartwright, the young red-haired orphan taken in by Ben, Vogel brought innocence and new life to a series that had already seen over a decade of storytelling. He was just 14, but his performances carried the weight of a seasoned actor. Jamie wasn't just another Cartwright, he was a symbol of healing, of hope, of second chances. Through him, viewers were reminded that the heart of the Ponderosa could still grow, still expand, and fans embraced him instantly. But time is a cruel editor. As Vogel matured, so did the challenge of writing for Jamie. The innocent boy had become a teenager, and the writers, already struggling to keep Bonanza fresh, seemed unsure where to take him. Slowly, Jamie's role diminished, his screen time shrinking as the show neared its end. And though there was no scandal, no fiery departure, Vogel felt it. He later admitted feeling trapped in the identity of the kid, even as he stood on the edge of adulthood. When Bonanza ended in 1973, Vogel's Hollywood journey shifted. He made a few appearances, guest spots on Little House on the Prairie, Here Comes the Brides, but the fire of fame didn't burn as hot anymore. Instead, he chose something different. He stepped away from the spotlight, away from auditions, away from the pressures of being the next big thing. He embraced a quieter life, one filled with family and private pursuits. For many, he will always be Jamie, that kind-hearted boy who joined the Cartwright family when they, and the audience, needed a reminder that hope still had a place on the frontier. Which of these stories caught you by surprise? Whose legacy touched you the most? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the untold stories of television's golden age. And be sure to click on the next video for more powerful tributes from the stars who made classic TV unforgettable.